For those of you who do catch up online with this class, and if you access it through Torah Media Atlanta, you should be aware that Yisrael Killian, who runs Torah Media Atlanta, reached out because donations to that site are down. For those of you who do take advantage of it, I would suggest making a donation online when you do use it so that he can continue that site.
This week's Torah portion is Mishpatim. And there's Mishpatim is abundance of mitzvahs in it. We cannot mention all of them, but we'll try to do some sort of brief outline of the Parsha and go back and hit some insights. The portion opens up with the laws involving slaves. Very appropriately, a nation of Israel who just became a nation, right? And from slavery is taught the laws of compassion if you have a slave. Now there's two ways you could have a slave in Jewish law. There's an Eved Ivri and an Eved Knani. An Eved Ivri, a Jewish slave, is one who, for example, stole something and could not make retribution, so the court sold him to a slave to pay off his debt. Okay? The Eved, that's an Eved Ivri, and the Talmud says a person who acquires an Eved Ivri, a slave from himself, it's really as if he acquired a master for himself. What does it mean? In other words, you cannot ask the slave to do anything menial. You can't say, just sit there and dig for no reason, or menial task like, clean the commode. And not only that, but if you're in a situation, for example, you're sleeping in a bed with, and you only have one pillow in the house, right? You can't sleep with a pillow, and your slave doesn't have a pillow. You have to give it to him, and you have to go without the pillow. It's amazing, right? So, this is an important issue because we, as I mentioned, were slaves, and we're taught that upon, being the nation of God, we have to exhibit compassion in everything. Now, most people, this is unique, because the human nature is that people that are oppressed, when they get physical freedom, they become the worst oppressors. Much worse than they were oppressed. Witness today's society and the political leanings to certain ethnic groups, we won't mention their names, and the injustices and the reverse discrimination that's going on. The Torah portion goes on to describe all sorts of torts, civil laws, a lot of it that's adopted by the secular judicial system, like double jeopardy, the idea that if you injure somebody, you have to pay them for their compensation, losing work, the compensation of doctor bills, of the pain inflicted, of embarrassment. There's 5 different categories that you have to pay someone upon afflicting them. A lot of this has been adopted by the secular court system. Some of the other laws that are discussed here, for example, if you have a goring ox, the responsibility a person has to have for his livestock. Of course, this could be extrapolated to modern machinery. Anything that's under your jurisdiction, you are responsible for. Right? A goring ox, if he more than 3 times an established pattern, that means you're held responsible. If that goring ox kills somebody, you have a death penalty on you. For example, other things, a pit in the public domain. Right? And you cause someone to get injured, you're responsible for. Injuring a person, eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, a hand for a hand, right? One of the big misnomers, right, mistranslations that the Goyish world has taken to mean that we literally extract someone's eye if they knock someone else's eye out, which of course is not true. It's a monetary compensation. God willing, will give you a beautiful insight and example of that. The mitzvah of not to have meat and milk together is derived from our Torah portion. It says you shall not cook a kid in its mother's milk. That's the scriptural law. And from there, in fact, that mitzvah is repeated 3 times in the Torah to teach us that It's also, you're not allowed to derive any benefit from meat and milk together. You're not allowed to cook meat and milk together, and you are not allowed to eat meat and milk together. Okay? That's from our Torah portion as well. Some of the other things that I talked about, a person cannot curse his father and mother or cause a bruise on them. That has a death penalty on it. Right? A doctor is given permission to heal somebody from our Torah portion. Chapter 21, verse 19, if we didn't have that verse, a doctor would have no right to actually try to heal someone. One could reason, all afflictions come from God, all illnesses come from God, therefore what right does a human being have to try to heal you? Well, we have a scriptural verse, so it's good, he's allowed. But even so, that is the limitation. In other words, a doctor is never allowed to say, well, he has 3 days to live. Not allowed to say that. He's allowed to heal, but death, life and death, is only in the hands of God. And a doctor has no right to say, this person's going to die. That's none of his business. He has no jurisdiction on that. He just has to heal. Okay. Other things that are in the Parsha are people fighting, accidentally hitting a third innocent party. What's the tort involved there? We mentioned the goring ox and the pit in the public domain. A thief that comes into someone's house, right? A person is allowed to kill him. It's interesting because they say a person knows, this is chapter 22, verse 1, a thief knows that no one's going to stand by idly while you're sitting there and taking his booty. I love that word. Don't know what it means, but it's just a great word. Right? So he's going to kill, unless the Torah says, verse 2, chapter 22, verse 2, Im zarcha hashemesh alav, if the sun shines on him, which means if he did it during the day, but metaphorically, if you will, it means if it's so obvious, like clear as day, that this person will not take your life. For example, a father or a son stealing from a father, again, it may be bad, he's stealing, but he wouldn't take his own son's life, right? Therefore, you're not allowed to kill him. Okay? Very technical halachas, and it's very significant that it's juxtaposition to the Ten Commandments. Ve'ela hamishpatim, it opens up. The portion opens up, ve'ela mishpatim, ve'ela, ve means and. In other words, a connection, a continuation of the Ten Commandments. What was the last of the Ten Commandments? Right. Lo tachmod, you shouldn't covet. Our Parsha is an extension of that, telling you what it is you're allowed to have, what you're not allowed to have. The whole Parsha, in a certain sense, says Ramban, Nachmanides, is an explanation of the last of the Ten Commandments. What you're allowed and not allowed to have. That's one of the reasons for Ve'ela Mishpatim, and these are the judgments. Right? The other, many other reasons. Another reason is to teach you, well, let's look at the Rashi together. The first Rashi in our portion says, Eila has come to add, Eila Moisif al Rishonim, to add to what we previously learned, Ma Rishonim Sinai, just like the earlier commandments, the Ten Commandments, right, were from Mount Sinai. Af Eilu Sinai, so too these are from Mount Sinai, right? Now, of course, the whole Torah is from Mount Sinai, right? Why would I thought differently? Right? So, because these being, judicial matters, interrelationships with people, stealing, right, a goring ox, you would think, well, these are things that society makes up. Right? Society determines these things and they can establish the laws. Right? And the truth is, in most countries, most civilized countries, there is what looks like very similar laws. Compensations for injuring parties and so forth and so on. So the Torah is telling you, no, that is not why we do these quote-unquote logical, rational, societal, cultural laws. We do it because it was commanded to us at Mount Sinai. Now, what's the significance of that? that we just don't do it because it makes sense, but we do it because it's commanded Mount Sinai. So I'll quote you from the Mashgiach, Rav Yerucham of Levovitz, and he says the following. The Goyim, they also have laws, right? But the laws of the secular world, they're founded by decisions, whether it's the Constitution of the United States, whatever, is people that are basically involved in their society and are influenced by their particular culture, by their civilization, by their age, by their environment, right? And therefore, based on that environment, that political setting, they make what they feel is appropriate laws. Now, the danger of that is that because the laws are based on their various lifestyles and value systems, right, if the value systems change, right, there's pressure, there's coercion, there's lobbying by homosexuals, to consider that an alternative lifestyle, then they change the law. Alabama, until recently, I think they had a death penalty on homosexuals. I like Bama. At any rate,
I thought he would.
So, right? So so they're not set laws. They'll fluctuate. They'll change according to the what's considered politically incorrect at the time. Okay? So their laws, the secular laws, are often consequently, their laws are very inconsistent and they're very illogical. That's the man-made hukim, if you will, the man-made statutes. They're illogical because they conform to the particular time. They don't stay constant. On the contrary, Torah, these laws, Rashi's telling us, Elam Sinai also, these come from Mount Sinai. These are divine laws. And we don't steal, right? And we compensate someone that we injured, not because it makes sense. No, we do it because God said do it. And it's no matter what the political structure, what the age, what the environment is, okay? So, and that, by the way, stems very nicely with the famous statement from the Zohar. The Zohar says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu estakel baraisa v'bara alma, right? Right. Which means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Jeff in his modesty wants me to translate this. He can handle this by himself, but so I'll take this one. So, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah and created the world. Yeah? The Torah is the blueprint of the world, right? Those of you who have a stone chumash, at the beginning, if you look at it, they have a nice little essay on this. I think it says God's blueprint for the world. And he makes the comparison just like an architect. What's the first thing they do before they build an edifice, right? You didn't think I could pronounce that word, did you? Huh? Okay. What do? They first draw up a blueprint, right? And then they build that darn structure. Okay? Yeah, it's a mystical book. Zohar is the mystical book of Kabbalah, and you can find Jeff on most evenings about midnight learning it with a candle balanced on his forehead there. Yes. Zohar, the credit most people give the Zohar is by Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, who wrote the Zohar. But your question is actually deeper than maybe even you realize. Really, the author of the Zohar, it really is Hashem himself. All the Torah, everything we are learning, there's no new thoughts in Torah. It was all given to Moshe at Mount Sinai from God. Okay? Subsequent books that are written was all known to Moshe Rabbeinu. But that book that was put together, even though the knowledge is already known, is Rav Shimon Bar Yochai. Now, let me finish with this part. So that famous statement, HaKadosh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah, created the world, right? The Torah is the blueprint, teaches us that as opposed to man-made statutes that change, as we mentioned, with the environment and the times, right? The Torah is divine, and that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Torah is the blueprint, right? That man was created and shaped according to the Torah and the mitzvahs. You understand? In other words, because there's a mitzvah in the Torah, honor your father and mother, a person's born of parental units. Not the opposite. You think, I was born, from a father and mother, and therefore I have a mitzvah that I should be grateful to him and give him honor, which is also true. There's an element of that. But the main reason that there's a mitzvah in the Torah, that preceded, the cart before the horse. What preceded? The Torah came first. There's a mitzvah, right, to offer first fruits, Bikurim. Therefore, God made it that there's fruits that come off trees, because for that mitzvah of the Torah. We look at everything backwards. So much so that the 613 mitzvahs are divided into positive mitzvahs and negative mitzvahs. There's 365 positive mitzvahs. 365 correspond to the days of the solar year. 248 negative commandments correspond to the limbs in the body. So you see, man's condition, both in time and his physical body, were made according to the laws of the Torah. And we're going to see, God willing, next week's Torah portion, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which is considered a microcosm of creation, is also parallels to the spiritual universe, things in the Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and parallels to the human body. Right? Like the Holy of Holies. Well, that's parallel to the heart. Okay? That's the main seat, the main lifeblood of the Mishkan was the Holy of Holies. Where the Ark was, that's equivalent to the heart. So forth and so on. So anyways, 365, 248 mitzvahs, right? They correspond to this to teach us again that the Kodesh Baruch Hu looked into the Torah, created the world accordingly, so to observe these commandments. Okay? I don't know what this means exactly, but it says the Torah preceded creation for 973 generations. This is a very mystical concept, so we don't really understand what it means. But the Torah is called the thought process of Hashem. Now that means that's very significant. That means when you learn Torah, which is the greatest mitzvah a person can do, you're locking in to the highest capacity a human can lock into. You're locking into the thought process of Hashem. Now obviously there's different layers of Torah. But even just learning and translating the words, you're locking into the highest possible. Now, that's significant because there's two ways of learning Torah, right? You can learn Torah as an instruction book. Actually, the word Torah, that's what it means. Torah is from the word hora, a guide, an instruction, right? What to do, right? How to do it. We came with a how to do it book, right? So you can learn the Torah to learn, how do I do this mitzvah? Well, let's learn the Torah. That's what we do. We do that. Let's learn the Torah to figure out how do we do the various mitzvahs. Like tzedakah. You think tzedakah is a simple mitzvah? Different ways of doing it. You can create a sin by giving tzedakah. You embarrass somebody publicly by giving him tzedakah in such a fashion, it's better you didn't give to him. Right? So you got to understand the different halachas involved. That's one way of learning Torah. Then there's what we discussed, learning Torah just for the sake of delving into the highest spirituality possible, to understand your Creator. The more you learn Torah, the more you understand and appreciate God, and you get a closeness to Him, and you refine yourself. You develop yourself spiritually, your soul. Right? So you make yourself, that's what it says, right, in Pirkei Avos, that this world is like an antechamber to the next world. The preparation in this world, that's what you're supposed to do, to have a smooth transition to a pure spiritual realm. Okay? So all this, says the Beis HaLevi, is symbolized by two of the most famous words, if you will. All words are equal in the Torah, but these happen to be very famous in this week's Torah portion. And that is Na'aseh v'nishma. Right? God went to all the nations of the world. The famous Medrash, right? He went to the children of Esav and he says, do you want the Torah? They said, what's in it? They said, don't kill. They said, we can't accept it. That's our main occupation. We live to kill. They went to, Yishmael, the Arab nations. You want the Torah? They said, what's in it? They said, don't steal. Can't do it. That's our parnasa. Right? And we went to Israel finally, and Israel didn't ask what's in it. We said, Na'aseh v'nishma, we'll do it. Na'aseh will do it. V'nishma, then we'll hear what's in it. Okay? So it says the Beis HaLevi, if you look at the Gemara in Shabbos, Tractate Shabbos, says the following. B'sha'ah shedimu Yisrael Na'aseh l'nishma, at the time that Israel prefaced the words Na'aseh to Nishma, that they first said Na'aseh and then said Nishma, we'll do and then we'll listen. Bo shishim robo shel malchi ashares v'kashu l'kol echas v'echas miYisrael shnei kesorim. Well, 600,000 angels came down from heaven, and they put on each Jew 2 crowns. Well, it's a very, spiritual, Kabbalistic idea here. We don't know what it means. And then came, whatever, it continues, came the sin of the golden calf, and they took it away from us. Okay. But the idea is, and it says later that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a voice came out from heaven and said, who revealed to my children the language of angels? That's the way angels speak. Na'aseh v'nishma. We'll do, we'll hear. They don't question my ways. They automatically do my bidding. Who revealed the secret to my children? Flesh and blood are talking like pure spiritual beings. How is that possible? Okay. So that was the greatness that we said that. Now, obviously, Beis Halevi, Beis Halevi is talking about this Gemara, that the greatness was not just that we said Na'aseh v'nishma, the greatness that gave us this tremendous reward, this spiritual, 2 crowns, and that the voice of heaven came out, who revealed the secret of the language of angel to my children, not just that we said Nishma, but the fact that Hikdimu Yisrael Na'aseh nishma, that we prefaced first saying Na'aseh, we'll do, and then Nishma. Okay, that was the big kunz. Why? Just what we said. If we had said Nishma, the Na'aseh, we'll hear, and then we'll do, what does that imply? We'll hear, we'll understand, we'll learn the Torah to find out how to do the mitzvahs. You understand? No, we didn't say that. We said Na'aseh v'nishma, which represents, symbolizes that we realize the intrinsic worth of Torah by itself, even if it doesn't have a so-called practical application, which is a misnomer anyways. Everything in Torah is practical. But it means Na'aseh, we're going to learn to do the mitzvahs. Not only that, Nishma, right? Even after we know how to do the mitzvahs, right? We'll still learn, just for the sake of delving into the Torah and getting close to you. So that was it. That hikdimu, that we first said Na'aseh v'nishma, representing that we realized just Talmud Torah keneged kulam, that learning Torah is equal to all it's the highest mitzvah you can do. Intrinsically connecting to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Okay, so that was the greatness of Israel. Okay, that's very important. Else, what would happen? A person says, I can learn to do the mitzvahs. Once I know how to do the mitzvahs, I don't need to learn Torah. No, we don't say that. Therefore, any mitzvah that doesn't seem to have a practical application today, I'll give you an example. We have a Ben Sora Morer, a rebellious son. There's a case in the Torah, if a boy between the ages of 12 and a half and 13 drinks a certain amount of wine and meat and acts in a gluttonous manner, whatever it is, he's got a death penalty on him. Gemara says, never was such a case, never will be such a case. Idol-worshipping city, Ira Nidachas, completely idol-worshipping city, mitzvah to wipe it out. Gemara says, never was such a place, never will be, according to one opinion of the Gemara. So why is it there? We don't know. There's many, many deep, mystical reasons for all the commandments of the Torah. But as far as we're concerned, we just sit there and learn it. And that's what Talmud's about. You learn, your hair split, all these different opinions. Rava says this, Abaye says this, and you go back and forth, 2-3 pages in the Gemara, hours an hour, and it all turns out to be just a Havamina. It's not even something that's really going to be. And you dismiss it all and you go on learning. Oh, it seems like a waste of time. No, there's an intrinsic worth in learning Torah, in connecting to the thought process, if we can say that, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Good. Na'aseh v'nishma, and the simple meaning, if you will, is you giving us something, we're not going to question. Of course we'll accept it. Absolutely. That's one of the, there's many reasons. There's the Na'aseh going on, the mitzvahs that we can do, and Nishma will learn about those mitzvahs we can't do and get credit for it. For example, sacrifices. Right? We can't do that, but by learning it, HaKadosh Baruch Hu counts as if we did it. Or Na'aseh, they say, is going on the written Torah, and Nishma is on the oral Torah, or the rabbinical mitzvahs. Na'aseh on the positive, we'll do the positive, and Nishma will be careful about the negative commandments, not to violate them. Many, many different interpretations. The other interpretation of Na'aseh and Nishma, just to sum this up, Na'aseh, doing, physical doing, is with the body, and Nishma is with the kavanah, the intent, the spirit, The body and the spirit, right? The body and the soul. So physically we'll do the mitzvah and all that, but in spirituality, nishma, we'll learn about it, and we'll get a depth for it, okay? And we'll do it with the right kavanas and put as much into it. Nasa v'nishma. Both you can have all the spiritual intentions you want, but if you don't physically do the mitzvah, you don't get the mitzvah. And if you just do the mitzvah, by rote, well, it's like a body without a soul. Okay, and then finally, what you said, Nasa v'nishma, that's just to mavatal your das to Hashem, to completely nullify your will before God's will. That's the ikar, that's the main thing, that you're just completely nullifying yourself. Whatever you say, I'm going to do. Nasa v'nishma, that's the anthem of the Jewish people. Okay, question was asked, about what if the secular law conflicts with Torah law. We have a mitzvah in the Torah that we are supposed to listen to the secular law. We have to abide by the laws of the country. Okay? So that's for sure. Now, so this comes into play. There's certain mitzvahs in the Torah that are like, I'll give you an example. There was a mitzvah in the Torah, so we have a ban, but at one time there was a mitzvah that you could marry more than one woman. Okay? Now, so many countries, that's not legal. So that wasn't like, that was allowed. It wasn't like, you understand? In other words, if you didn't marry more than one woman, you weren't violating anything. So therefore, there's no conflict. And in those countries, like the United States, you wouldn't be allowed to do it. It's not applicable today because there's a ban on that. I'm just saying at the time there was. Okay. Now, where it gets more tricky when there is a direct conflict to the Torah. And each one of those has to be handled individually. But in general, when we have a mitzvah to abide by all the secular laws, unless the law of the country is out to uproot Judaism. And that's what happened during the time of Hanukkah. They made decrees, and the Romans also, to learn Torah in public, would have a death penalty, right? You weren't allowed to do bris milah. Right, and at that point, we even have to sacrifice our lives for even the slightest mitzvah. Okay? The prophecy, why we don't have prophets today, there's a balance in the world. Zeh le'umas zeh. Kodesh Baruch Hu made a balance for free will. If good was more obvious than bad, there would be no such thing as rewarding us for doing mitzvahs. It would be obvious, right? Gold showered down from heaven every time you do a mitzvah. Everybody do mitzvahs, right? So, in response to that, that's where in our Torah portion, they actually say, the fact is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu veiled the full comprehension of the mitzvahs, right? Because if we really understood the meaning and the delight and the Kabbalistic secrets of all the mitzvahs, right, we would pursue it with all the zest and eagerness that we do transitory pleasures, right? But that's not really being an Eved Hashem. It's not really being a servant to God, right? That you're doing it for ulterior motives. Nasa v'nishma means I'm obeying God's commandments, even though the full brilliance of the comprehension of the mitzvah is masked to me. I don't understand it, right? And God does that to test us, right? To test us, are we going to obey out of love and faith, right? Even when our senses and our intellect don't comprehend what's going on and it's not satisfied, we still serve Hashem. That is obeying first, understanding later. That is Nasa v'nishma. Nasa will do, Nishma will try to learn and understand. The submission of the intellect to God, says Rav Simcha Zissel of Kelm. Okay, now, so to answer your question, right, this balance, right, this is part of the balance. We had a negative drive to idol worshiping, which we do not understand today. They were on a very great level, so they were given a great test. But there was a conversation in the Gemara where this great tzaddik appeared to one of the sages in the Talmud, who kind of poked fun at him for worshiping idols. It was one of the kings of Israel. And he said, had you lived in my generation, you would have picked up your cloak and ran after the idol. It was such a drive, we don't relate to it. So the sages saw, the men of the Great Assembly saw that was destroying Judaism. This negativity for idol worshiping was one of the sins that caused the destruction of the first temple. So they prayed to God to remove that Yetzer Hara, to remove that evil inclination to idol worshiping. So, by the same token, God answered their prayers and did this, but by the same token, He had to remove prophecy. for there to be that balance. If just the negativity, that spiritual negativity, which is parallel to prophecy, was taken away and prophecy was left in the world, there would be a tremendous imbalance where good was too much too obvious. Okay? So therefore, for that balance, prophecy was taken away to compensate for that negative drive that was taken away of idol worshiping. This is a beautiful word that Rav Emanuel Feldman said here once on Nasa v'Nishma. He says that Nasa means we're going to do it. That's what it literally means. We're going to do the mitzvahs. We're going to do it only because you said do it. Just like you said. No other reason. You said do it, we're going to do it. Right? So what's the nishma? And we'll listen, or we'll learn. What does that come to add? So he says, Rav Emanuel says very nicely, nishma is going on, that means to listen, literally. Each one of us has our own understanding of the Torah and mitzvahs that moves our soul. Some of us are affected by, a certain understanding of pshat more than others, right? Some things I'm saying will affect people in different ways, right? Or different rebbeim will affect people in different ways, because everybody has a leaning of their soul in a different, different sensitivities, different insights, right? So he says Nasa means all of us is coming upon us to Nasa. We do the mitzvahs of Hashem. For no other reason you command it. Then there's a certain geschmack, a certain personal relationship to the Torah and the mitzvahs. That's nishma. Each and every one of us looks at it differently, does the Torah and mitzvahs differently, with our unique characteristic and personality traits. So that's the nishma, he says. We delve in and we see the beauty of our Torah that only we can see, individually, because each one of us is different. We mentioned that this is the juxtaposition. I love that word. I like that word. I don't know what it means. I saw it in a book once. I know, but that's what it means. I know something like that. I don't know. Yeah, okay, who cares? Anyway, so this Parsha we said was in conjunction to Lod Sachma to teach us many things. But another insight that we've got to mention is that in business relationships towards all these things are just as holy as I'm the Lord your God. In other words, a person cannot be, have a tremendous relationship with God and pray to Him and everything and be dishonest in business dealings. Or vice versa. He can't be a good Jew at heart, a cardiac Jew, and have, no relation to God and don't do the mitzvahs. You gotta have both. So this Parsha is telling us these interrelationships with people, the business relationship and damages and all these things, right? That's also part of being a Goy Kodesh, a holy nation. Right, a Mamlechas Kohanim, a kingdom of priests. You have to interrelate with each other in Kedusha, with holiness. And that, therefore, he says the Sanhedrin, the Jewish court of law, their location was right near the Har Bayis, right near the Holy Temple. The Holy Temple is where you go in and you worship God. And the Sanhedrin, what do? They're the Jewish court of law. They decide decisions between man and man. Both, and again, the juxtaposition of the two teaches us that, I can pronounce that word correctly, and it teaches us that those are equally important. Your interrelationships with each other have to also be dealt in the same manner that you serve God in the shul. In other words, there's no division between shul and state. Okay. Now, take it easy, Jeff. Lean back. Got a pillow, anybody? Okay, here we go. Interesting. Sinai, Mount Sinai, right? Thank you. Okay. The other word, Sinai, also has a relationship to the word Sina, which means hatred. Well, that's very interesting. So, in our Torah portion, in chapter 19, verse 6, it uses the famous expression, God calls us a Mamlechas Kohanim v'Goy Kodesh, a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Right? So, with that comes a tremendous responsibility. And if you want to know, it's a direct quote from the prophet that Hashem requires of us what He doesn't require from other nations, and when we go off the path and don't observe His Torah mitzvahs, we get potched. And we get afflicted more than the other nation, because we are a Goy Kodesh. We are a holy nation. So, we are going to remain distinct and separate and elitists grew in one of two ways. Either by Sinai, by keeping the Torah mitzvahs, right?
Right.
And if we try to reject that, then will come the Sina, the hatred of the nations. Right? Either we keep the Torah mitzvahs on our own, and we're made distinct, or they'll remind us that we're a Jew. Right? That's a two-way. We're going to be redeemed either way. And the Gemara says either we do tshuva on our own, Sinai, or Hashem will appoint upon us someone as cruel as Haman, right? And that will bring us back to Yiddishkeit. Okay? Sinai or Sinna. It's up to us. Something to what you're saying, but the truth is, there's times in our history when everybody's doing the Torah mitzvahs, no one could touch us. And the big fallacy is we have throughout our house, King Solomon, Chizkiyahu, many times in our history. But, it's all of Israel to be on that level. It's very hard. And today we have an assimilation rate and so on and so on. But the big, big mistake that we've made throughout the eras is we always felt that if we assimilated and we just weren't so different than them, they will like us. And we did it in Egypt, and that's the holiday of Pesach. We tried to assimilate and be like the Egyptians. And the verse in Tehillim says, God changed the hearts of the Egyptians to hate us. He had to do that. That's the story of Purim. We try to be like the Persian. That's the story of Hanukkah, the Hellenists. Right? That's the story of every holiday in Jewish history. That we keep thinking, by not being different, to blend in with them, they'll like us. And the truth is, it's just the opposite. When we show Jewish pride, right, self-respect gains respect. Okay? So that's a big fallacy that we fall into. I'll quote you this Or Chaim from our Torah portion. We don't know. It's incumbent upon us to try to do the mitzvahs as much as possible. We have a situation today, a polarization. We have the biggest Baal Tshuva movement, more people returning to Yiddishkeit. At the same time, we have a tremendous assimilation rate of 6 million intermarried. Right? So, it's interesting. Or Chaim brings down from chapter 21, verse 11, dealing with the slave. If a person accidentally knocks out a slave's a limb or a tooth or an eye or something, the slave goes out free. So he says, more symbolically, what does this mean? Vayatza chinam. He says, this is going on a deeper level on all of Israel. That they go out free means, afilu einam sadikim. Even if we are not all righteous, yetzu afilu kodem zman agula. We will go out, we'll be freed before the time of redemption. B'schus Yisurim Asher Kiblu. In merit, listen to the word, in merit of all the afflictions that we receive, all the accumulated suffering will get to a point where Hashem will say, that's enough. That's enough. They don't deserve any more. It's time for redemption. Even if we don't do tshuva. So your question is very difficult to answer because we don't know what that point is. But we do know not one affliction that's happened individually or to the nation of Israel is for naught. Hashem counts it. It pays off debts, whatever it is. The fact is, it may be our most valuable commodity. Because we cannot learn and do Torah like previous generations, but we're getting clocked. And believe me, here in America is the worst of afflictions. You don't see it on your body, but your soul and your intellect is getting clobbered. It is so hard to lock on to any Torah mitzvahs with bombardment of the secular society, the Western culture, the way it thinks. Have a good time. Enjoy the physical body, all the enhancement of the physical, and no dedication to the spiritual, and it affects everybody. South Africa, I have to tell you, there's physical persecution going on. Israel, there are things going on. Until recently, Russia, things going on. Germany is getting another Nazi group. Things are going on there. But in my humble opinion, one of the worst afflictions is what's called in the United States the Holocaust of love. That they accept us and the tolerance, even though it's not. There is anti-Semitism here. Don't get me wrong. There is physical anti-Semitism. But that's almost a preservative for the Jewish identity. That's almost something good to have a little bit of that. I know that sounds funny. The problem is when everything's going fine and we're not being persecuted, we're lulled into a false sense of security that this isn't a gullus. This is an exile. Everything's fine. That's a big, big gullus. That's the ultimate gullus. Rav Zev in Torah Moadim says the following. He says that the fact, again, and we're going to emphasize this point, that the mishpatim, these judgment, these logical laws and our interrelationships with each other are given at Mount Sinai. Again, he tells us there's certain halachas. For example, if a secular court is going to decide the same way as a Jewish court, you still have to take your case to a Jewish court, a Jewish beis din, right? So he says for the nations of the world, they have a judicial system for the tikkun olam, for civilization to exist. Okay, that's their reason. But he says that's a tremendous conflict why we do things. Again, we do things because, again, from Mount Sinai, God commanded it. And he says because there could be a time when people are under a certain pressure, right? And then they'll give up certain statutes, right? A person will reason because of his false ideologies and his desires, right? So he'll do away with a certain law. And he gives an example. For example, you can have people that will do murder in a certain nation, in a certain time period, against a certain people because of the pressures. They'll just go along with it and no one will protest it. Germany, right? They had a law, secular law, don't murder. But they said, because of their desire and their hatred and their false ideology, they said, murder at this time, at this place, these people, it's not really murder. You're doing a mitzvah. They dressed it up as something good. You're ridding the world of a pestilence, whatever it is. So that's very important. That seems like the most logical mitzvah. Don't murder. Right? And you can twist that even twist that. Therefore, we keep the commandment, don't murder, not because it makes sense. Because you said it, God. And that means the human intellect can never, fedray that around. Okay? Anshe Kaddish to you should be men of holiness. Anshe, man, also means anshe, like in anshias, in materialistic things, physicality. Right? Says the Kutzker Rebbe. Angels I have plenty of. Seraphim, spiritual beings I have plenty of to serve me. That's not what I want from you. I'm not interested in you sitting in an ivory tower and being divorced from the physical world. Anshe Kodesh to you, be men of Kedusha. Be involved in physical things. Right? Be involved in the physical, as we talk so many times. That raises the physical to the spiritual itself. Right? Eat for the sake of heaven. Sleep so you'll be strong to serve Hashem. Right? Right? The beautiful act of procreation. You're a partner with God in creation. Marriage is called Kedushin. Kedushin, the word Kaddish. And, that act of consummating it, that is the ultimate act of holiness. You're a part of Hashem bringing life into the world. And look what the world does with that. They make it into a base instinct of satisfying nerve endings, right? So that's not what we believe. We don't believe the opposite. The monks, completely, that's not what God wants. God wants you to deal with the physicality. Raise it. Right? Deal with it. Anshe Kodesh to you, Anshe Kodesh to you. Okay. Nasa v'nishma is in a plural language. Okay, it's a plural language. Now we reach a tremendous level at the splitting of the sea. You remember we talked about this? We point to God, whatever that means. We don't understand what that means. It's Zeh Keli Ve'anveu. This is my God. In other words, we have such a vivid prophecy, we could point to it. But that's in singular tense, if you notice. Zeh Keli. This is my God. Mount Sinai, we even reached a higher level. If you notice, Nasa v'nishma, we will do, and then we'll hear, is in plural. Simultaneously, we reach such a level of prophecy that not only we said we'll accept the Torah, but I accept it for my fellow Jew. I'm good. You hear that? Every one of us said, I'll accept the Jew and I'll hold my fellow Jew responsible because really all of Israel is one soul. We all come from underneath the throne of glory of God. We're part of God. Whatever this means, it's like an amazing statement, right? And we accept Achrayas responsibility for our fellow Jew keeping the Torah. So therefore, this becomes a very hard mitzvah. There's a mitzvah in the Torah of hochiach tochiach es hamisecha, that you should rebuke your fellow Jew. How do you do it? You could chase a person further away. Very technical halachas. But the concept is true, that we're responsible for each other. Rav Salanter used to say, he gave examples. We don't understand these things. But Rav Salanter said, a Jew who is speaking, let's say, Lashon Hora, here, is causing a Jew in Paris to violate Shabbos. Like sound waves, they're spiritual waves. By you doing a mitzvah, you strengthen someone in Israel who's trying to decide that Shabbos. You got up early, you didn't want to get up, you were very tired, you only got 4 hours sleep. You got up and you davened on time. You know what? There's a guy in Israel, in Tel Aviv, who's debating that Shabbos whether to go to the beach or not. And that mitzvah somehow affected him and decided not to do it that way. We are affected by each other's mitzvahs and sins. And that's why, yes, it's true that in the Holocaust there was 4 to 5 million assimilated Jews. But there was also 1 million righteous Jews who got struck down with the rest because we're responsible for each other. So, this is very complicated. Other Jews doing things, you want to do the Torah mitzvahs? Fine, mind your own business. It's not so simple. What you're doing is my business. You're drilling a hole underneath your seat in the boat. But we're all in the boat together. You're going to cause me to sink. Okay? So that becomes very difficult. Now, the Or Chaim says an interesting thing. I'll take questions. He says a person has to do all the Torah mitzvahs. Right? Everything that I told you, you have to do. Chapter 23, verse 13. Because the mitzvahs are parallel to the parts of the body, as we already mentioned, right? And if a person just does, I'll do these mitzvahs and not these mitzvahs, he's going to be missing a certain protection on the corresponding limb or organ. You hear this? So much so, the Arizal, the great Makubal, the Arizal, he, when people would come to him and they had a certain pain, arm hurts, right? Or whatever it is, or they had a chest pain, what did he used to do? He used to take their pulse. And he could tell from their pulse what mitzvah they neglected to cause the physical impairment, the pain that they're suffering. And he would tell them, you need to straighten up this and this mitzvah, so therefore physically you'll be well. Amazing. We're supposed to do all the mitzvahs. So Doreen's asking very good. We know some mitzvahs only women can do. Certain mitzvahs only men can do. Certain mitzvahs only Kohanim can do. So that's again the idea that we're all responsible for each other. And we get credit for each other's mitzvahs. The Kohanim doing their mitzvahs, we get credit for it. Okay, plus the fact we mentioned even mitzvahs that don't, like sacrifice, if you learn about them, sacrifices, you get credit for doing it. But that works in a positive fashion. We're all responsible for each other. Kol Yisrael arayivim zeh lazeh. We get clapped for each other's sins, but we also get credit for each other's mitzvahs. So much so that they say, the Arizal says at the beginning of davening, you know what a person should say? Hareini mikambal alai mitzvahs asa v'ahavta l'reacha kameicha. I'm now accepting upon myself the mitzvah to love my fellow Jew like myself. And he says by doing that, all the commandments that are going to be fulfilled by all Jewry, you get credit for it. We all share each other's mitzvahs. So the beautiful say it's actually in the siddur that I use. I know this is going to surprise you, this mitzvah, but chapter 23, verse 13 says, V'shem Elohim achrim lo taskiru lo yishma'al picha. You're not allowed to mention the names of their what they worship, their idol worshiping. And the Gemara says, Shalo yomar adam shamor li betzad avodah zarah ploinus. A person's not allowed to say, meet me at this and this church. You can't use it as a point of reference. And not only that, Talmud imi b'yom avodah zarah ploinus. I'll see you December 25th. You can say, but you can't say, I'll see you, on their, what they call their holiday. You're not allowed to, because you're giving it credence. Halila. Okay, very interesting lacha. Lo adstika rasha. Here's the O.J. Simpson mitzvah here. Chapter 23, verse 7. I will not cause the wicked to be righteous. If he comes out, the law of double jeopardy, by the way, if he comes out of the court, right, and you find evidence, or he's guilty, and he got off scot-free from court, don't worry about it. Says Hashem, Yesh li shalichim harbi lamiso. I have many agencies that can cause his death. If he has a death penalty on him, the worst thing in the world for him is to get acquitted in court. Because if you get your judgment in the court here on earth, you don't have to get a judgment on the court in heaven. And you much rather get judged here than there, because it's much more severe there. So, number one, if a person has a death penalty and all of a sudden the guy has an automobile accident or, an elephant stampedes him, whatever the case is, right? So, that's one way Hashem can take care of it. But if he goes through his whole life, hunky-dory, whatever it is, another one of my favorite words, hunky-dory, it's a great word. Okay, yeah, that's the worst thing for him. That means Hashem's not letting him pay off his debt in this world, he's going to get it in the next world. But don't worry about it. Lo atztika rasha, I will not make the wicked righteous, they're going to pay one way or another. Okay, ani ircha komin, the poor of your city come first. You hear this? Now this means in energy and time that you devote. Simple meaning of this is, you have a poor person in Cleveland, Ohio, and you got poor people in Atlanta, Jewish people in Atlanta, you have to take care of the poor people of your own city first. The only exception is Israel, because that's considered all of our, that's considered our city. Now, this means time and energy. This is talking about physical poverty. In spiritual poverty, a person has to divide their time and energy and have their priorities right. You have to take care of your own people, your own family person, the Jewish people, these people that spend so much energy and time in animal, environmental, civil rights, all these things. You got your priority out of whack. You got to take care of your own family first. We're people that cares about all humanity. Don't get me wrong, and all of God's creations. We got specific laws. You're not allowed to cut down a fruit-bearing tree in Israel. You're not allowed to have cruelty to cruelty to animals. Fine, but there's a balance. Okay, there's a balance. You got to know that balance. You got to know where the priorities are. Aniya ircha koimim, the poor of your city, physically and spiritually, they come first. You got to dedicate your time and energy to them. Okay, I'll leave you with this. That is ayin tachan ayin. We said the big misnomer that people, always say eye for an eye. So the Gemara tells us no problem. It really means kesef. It means money, right? So, if you have the Hebrew alphabet, we did this last night, in a row. This is the alphabet in order, right? Ayin tachan ayin, says the Gemara, is kesef. Kesef means money, right? It's a monetary payment. Says the Vilna Gaon, it's right there in the words. Ayin, the Hebrew word ayin is spelled ayin yud nun, right? Ayin tachas means instead, but it could also mean under. Little translates under. Ayin, under the letters ayin, that's what the phrase says, ayin tachas ayin, so you can read it. Ayin, the letters under ayin, let's take the letters under ayin, see what it spells. If you take the letter under the first letter, ayin, what do you have? A pay. Right? If you take the letters under the next letter of the Hebrew word ayin, the yud, you have a kaf. And if you take the next letter, going down, right, under nun, the next letter under nun is a samach. Spells the word kesef, money, monetary payment. Vilna Gaon, huh? The reason I tell you that is because everything is in the Torah. This is a Gemara. The Gemara tells us that it means monetary payment. But it's all derived from verses. We mentioned last night the Vilna Gaon in his later life, he didn't learn Gemara. He didn't learn Kabbalah. He didn't learn Medrash. He learned just the Chumash. He learned all those things through the verses in the Chumash. He saw all the Gemaras in the verse. He saw all the Kabbalah, everything from the words in the verse. It's all there. It's all there. It's just we're too weak to find it. So we need all these multitude of volumes and volumes of volumes of books to find it and go back and forth to figure it out. Someone on the Vilna Gaon's caliber, he saw it right there. Good Shabbos, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience. I got this one last thing. I'm sorry. This is, I'll have to say good Shabbos again. Okay. Ma'at agashenu. This is important. Chapter 23, verse 29. It says, when you come into the land, I'll chase out the inhabitants little by little. Pentia ar shmama. So the land will not become desolate. What does it mean? It says, because the wild, if I chase everybody out immediately, what's going to happen? Wild beasts, animals are going to come in there, and they'll devastate the land, right? Therefore, little by little, I'll chase out the inhabitants, and then you will conquer Israel in that fashion. So it's interesting. What would we have thought? We'd have thought, what's the best thing? Let's conquer all of Israel in one shot. Why is it? Oh, we can't. Just little by little, continual war, dragging out. That turns out to be a blessing. Because had we taken everybody out in one shot, the wild animals would have come in. If God had taken them out in one shot, the wild animals would have caused tremendous devastation to the agriculture of the land. The lesson there is things that happen in our lives. Gosh, it would certainly be better if I got that job immediately, or that shidduch immediately, whatever it is, And we don't, really, it's for our ultimate benefit. We don't see it. It's for our benefit that it's happening little by little, to give us a chance to mature, to grow, to get whatever spiritual utensils we need to develop, right? That's a big lesson in life. What looks like bad, little by little, I'll chase them out. It looks like something not so good, turns out to be a blessing. Good Shabbos once again.
Thank you for listening to Torah Media Atlanta. Won't you consider making a donation to help support this important work? Just go to TorahMediaAtlanta.com and click on the donate link. Thank you very much.